The catch-all action subsection allows me to cover all sorts of games from twin-stick shooters, real-time dungeon crawlers, first-person RPGs, runner-style games, arcade titles, and even a Hotline Miami-like or two. So let's begin with MECHIEVAL, a top-down shooter in which you pilot a 5-story tall mech in the Middle Ages, blasting away at demons spreading the plague, and does appear to have zombie-like enemies as well. The sheer concept of this is awesome, where super advanced tech in an olden setting is always interesting, hint for later on in this list, with the action looking good, and some of you will be glad to know that the developers don't describe this as a roguelite. A cool looking title is A Rat's Life: The Cat Conspiracy, in which you play as a rat in first person, with a main collectathon style gameplay loop, but also combat and Metroidvania inspiration in terms of unlockable skills, where, full disclosure, the developers have paused development on this while they make a smaller swing in the fun-looking Dino Cop, but promise to get back to work on this when that game is done. This video is brought to you by HYPERxFANTASY, an absolutely wild narrative RPG with action elements and dynamic movement, set in a brutalist dystopia on the brink of a digital apocalypse. You're exploring a massive, decaying megastructure alongside your companion, meeting strange characters, engaging in tense sword fights as you unravel a deep, unsettling conspiracy with a lot of narrative craziness but also a strong visual style, and thus give off strong Nier Automata vibes. It's unique, otherworldly, and looks cool as hell, so if that sounds interesting, wishlist HYPERxFANTASY now on Steam and play the demo during the Steam Next Festival in February. Ardenfall got attention since when it was first revealed, people immediately drew comparisons to Morrowind, the legendary entry in the Elder Scrolls series, where this open-ended first-person RPG sure looks to be in that vein, placing you in a world rich with intricate politics and ancient cultures. You can explore diverse landscapes from flowing plains to rain-drenched wetlands and forgotten dungeons teeming with danger, with the emphasis on player choice being the most important, since you can choose how you want to play, from a sneaky thief, a knight in shining armor, or a puppeteer manipulating politics from the shadows. The first-person combat looks very Elder Scrolls, and of course, will give you the freedom to resolve quests and engage the NPCs how you want, opting not to have any main storyline in which you are the Dragonborn or something, but rather allowing you to build your own narrative and find your own way in the world. Just a quick one here in ULTRABUGS, since this is the long-awaited title from Vlambeer, where if you didn't catch the news, was a 2-person Dutch team that made classics like Nuclear Throne and Ridiculous Fishing, but the two of them grew apart and in 2020 announced the shutting down of the studio. However, one of the developers sold all of their shares to the other in 2024 and is now solely owned, with the promise to eventually complete this arcade high-score shooter thing where it looks cool, so I want to play. From the developer of the hit Fly Night comes Sorceress, a first-person action-adventure title in which you play as said sorceress who breaks into a castle in an attempt to escape poverty, but now she has to find a way to escape the castle instead. This game emphasizes the creative use of elemental magic and flexible systems to the extent of being like an immersive sim when it comes to giving you options to deal with different situations, where you can cast and combine spells, use magic weapons to manipulate physics, the environment and enemies, as well as use anything you can find in the castle to your advantage, from fire, crates, barrels, and even enemy weapons. This will have an assortment of handcrafted levels, which is interesting since I thought it would be more of a small open world kind of setup, but the sheer variety of things that you can do, which the game accounts for, looks impressive, so definitely add it to your wishlist. Back in 2019, a free game named Undefeated made waves, going super viral since everyone praised it for being the Superman game that bigger developers cannot seem to get right, where in the years since then, they have formed an actual studio and got a publisher and everything for Undefeated Genesis. Similarly, this is a superhero action game in which you can soar freely through the skies, exploring an alien world and unleashing powerful attacks to take down giant enemies in huge, destructible environments. You play as an ordinary student but luckily or unluckily was hit by a meteor and is somehow transported to this new world, so maybe it's an isekai game, with the boss fights and combat looking great. So while Undefeated was a great proof of concept, let's see if they manage to nail it in the final game. Things are perhaps a bit up in the air with regards to this title, where the developer says that the footage of this gameplay trailer is pre-alpha and might not be representative of the final game, where ExeKiller is a retro-futuristic western game set in a post-apocalyptic alternate timeline. You play as Denzel Phoenix, a bounty hunter who takes on contracts to collect souls, biochips that gather information and control individuals on behalf of a powerful corporation. And in typical fashion for this kind of setup and setting, our protagonist discovers an unsettling truth which now places him in the crosshairs of powerful factions. Interestingly, driving distances between locations in this game is a feature, so who knows what you will encounter on the open road, with various choices to make when it comes to completing quests and resolving different situations, contributing to the linear narrative but with non-linear choices. Interestingly, there is no XP or leveling up in this game, where progression is centered around your choice of mods, augments and tech used to upgrade your weapons, so it definitely falls more into the action camp, with the very brown looking colour palette being intentional as well, since it sure invokes the post-apocalypse and looks neat. A fantastic looking dungeon crawler is Blood Servants, where you awaken in a desolate prison stripped of your strength and powers, where you need to battle through cursed dungeons to gain them back. Failures are not setbacks in this game, but stepping stones to greater power, with the developers asking what will you sacrifice in order to become stronger. It plays somewhat like a side-scrolling beat-em-up, think Lost Castle 2 for example, also having co-op support for up to 4 players and does look great, which is a signature of developer OneShark. There are of course plenty of RPG elements in leveling, loot, a talent tree, and even pets, aka the titular Blood Servants, which can fight alongside with you, contributing extra damage, buffs, and more. Interestingly, the developer keeps talking about progression on your endless quest for power, where you can upgrade stats, gear, skill, or even the town, and when you are quote-unquote maxed out, you can use the rebirth system to reset your level while retaining skills, looking to have that kind of isometric action RPG style gameplay loop, and is high potential. Another neat first-person action RPG is Travel Night Adventure, a fast-paced title set in medieval times, but where you have access to guns, magic, and also a kick. You fall from the sky and find yourself in a new world, exploring various settlements, castles and cities, and delving into dungeons and tombs filled with hidden treasures, traps, and riddles. There will be over 30 different types of weapons and magic items, as well as 50 handcrafted locations with no procedural generation here, with an adorable art style as well. An almost runner-style title is Paper Sky, in which you play as a paper airplane free to explore this handcrafted semi-open world. Your goal is to deliver your message, whatever that means, where the paper plane will make its way through a variety of landscapes, building up momentum and using that to glide through the world, where the paper can also be crumpled up into a ball which can roll, which adds to the fun. This game is all vibes, exploration and movement, with a fantastic art style that is just so pretty. Perhaps the first-person RPG to watch is the Wayward Realms, technically indie, but they did have a very successful Kickstarter campaign and is being made under two of the lead developers who made the original Elder Scrolls Arena and Daggerfall, so their names carry weight, which has led to the success of the campaign, raising over $765,000. Set in the archipelago, a collection of over 100 realistically scaled islands, you can explore a vast open world where choices and consequences matter. Visit expansive cities, dense forests, towering mountain ranges, and vast oceans, where curiously, it does have some elements of procedural generation as well as a virtual game master, think tabletop RPGs, who will adapt the narrative based on your decisions to create a constantly evolving story. There will be deep lore as well as plenty of character customization options where you can choose how you want to play, similar to Ardenfall mentioned earlier, and is certainly of interest. A fun-looking 2.5D title is Bandit Knight, in which you step into the shoes of a master thief. Your mission is to outsmart enemies, steal legendary treasures, and navigate a vibrant world with an emphasis on stealth and strategy, since you can pickpocket, throw knives, and solve puzzles as you attempt to become the king of the thieves. Stealth titles are quite rare these days, and while this isn't exactly like MGS, it does seem like a nice blend of action and sneaking around, where you have to make use of various tools and upgrades to enhance your thieving abilities, so if you love the genre, keep an eye on this. On paper, Alkahest is one of the most anticipated titles since it got attention the moment it was revealed for looking this good, and while relatively quiet, the developers are also sharing updates, so work is being done on the game. This is a first-person action-adventure RPG set in a gritty medieval world where you play as the youngest son of a petty lord who is not a hero but is trying to become one by proving their worth, beginning with investigating unusual goblin raids on the county border, and so our adventure begins. There are a variety of medieval fantasy locations to explore, like castles, forests, villages, and more, with NPCs to meet, quests to complete, and decisions that will impact your own fate. The first-person combat looks impressive, mixing in melee and ranged weapons, as well as potions and even rope for quite the number of options. There is a complex alchemy system to explore, with again the visuals doing much of the heavy lifting, but certainly add it to your wishlist if interested. Once upon a time, I had Sacrifire in my JRPG list, but as the developers revealed more about the game, it began to take the form of a real-time action JRPG with platforming exploration, with combat mixing both real-time and turn-based, which is quite interesting. It seems like a very classic JRPG kind of story setup, full of twists, turns, and betrayals, but interestingly, it's set in two worlds, a sprawling subterranean city, as well as an idyllic spirit paradise. For combat, you are moving and dodging in real time, which seems to switch into turn-based when chaining together combos and attacks, looking like a very interesting system to wrap your head around. Of course, the pixel art is on point, mixed in with 3D environments and objects, so it does look appealing, with this being in development for quite a long time, but yet we still do not have a release date or even window, but good things come to those who wait, so maybe just a little bit longer. There have been a number of action-based builders following in the footsteps of the Rift Breaker, where it is such a mishmash of genres that you can pretty much place them in any of their subgenres, from base defense, city builders, tower defense to action RPG or survival crafting, so I guess Land of Symbiosis fits in here, controlling and playing like an isometric action RPG, but with resource gathering, crafting, base building, tower defense, and even survival game elements like food and thirst to deal with. You are attempting to survive in this hostile alien world, but all your technology, from the buildings to your suit, generates electromagnetism, which attracts and provokes the alien creatures, so you need to defend your base to fend them off, eventually venturing outside to battle monstrous bosses, all as you attempt to find a way off the planet and to get home, looking absolutely sick and is one to watch. I last covered Ruby Knight in my video on upcoming pixel art games, in which this is a 3/4 view dark fantasy boss rush action title in which you play as Ruby, a princess who escaped from the Scarlet Kingdom under duress, now embarking on a quest to take it back. To do so, you need to battle all sorts of horrific bosses, having a unique focus mechanic to identify and pinpoint her enemies' weaknesses so you can deliver critical attacks, which is the only way of dealing damage. With every boss defeated, you will absorb their powers, gaining new skills and abilities for the next battle, along with a variety of talismans that alter your combat style, but I still come back to the pixel art here since it just looks awesome. This next title got a bit of momentum on social media as well, since Haste Broken Worlds is an intense 3D endless runner in which you are making your way through an infinite number of worlds falling apart, dodging and weaving to avoid trees, branches, thorns, cacti, lasers and more as you desperately attempt to jump into the next portal to get to the next world. You are speeding through the air and can leap and jump but have to perfect the landing and simply looks so fast. Also coming to us from Landfall, creators of Totally Accurate Battle Simulator and other notable titles, and is certainly of interest. One of the sickest looking first-person slashers is Unawake, set during the never-ending war between angels and demons, where you have been chosen to be an Unawake tasked with bringing peace and unity to this ravaged land. You do so by fighting merciless demons and other nightmarish creatures, being a combat-focused melee entry, which is certainly interesting, with plenty of skill-based progression and even loot and weapon variety to keep things interesting, where if you love the idea of this, definitely check out Elderborn if you have not. One of the sickest looking top-down shooters is Kusan, City of Wolves, basically Hotline Miami, but starring anthropomorphic animals instead of playing as a mask-wearing serial killer. This comes to us from a Korean developer, and it appears to have some Korean crime, movie and drama inspiration in its vibes and story, where you play as a former soldier turned fixer, tasked with protecting a girl who has the power to endanger the city. Your main weapons are a steel fist named the War Hand, which you can use to smash enemies, an auto-targeting quantum knife, as well as a variety of guns, all of which can be upgraded, but OG indie game fans will immediately see Hotline Miami in this, even down to how the character holds their guns, but I'm not complaining since it looks great, and they did announce their publisher in November 2024, so development is chugging along. I last covered this title when previewing the games of January, in which Secret Agent Wizard Boy and the International Crime Syndicate got pushed to March 2025, but don't take it as fact since it might slip again. Where this is of note since it's basically a Harry Potter game full of Magic Academy hijinks including spells, but mixes in 007 style espionage as you try to topple the crime syndicate of the headmaster Grumble Mott, coming to us from the Semensky brothers, who, separately, made titles like Dusk and My Friendly Neighborhood and looks awesome. A more meaty looking action-adventure RPG with brawler combat is Arisen Force Vonimir, having that neat HD 2D look of pixel art sprites but also 3D environments as well as foreground and background elements. This is a real-time action game in which you lead a party of characters to battle against your enemies, both of the human and fantasy variety. I believe this is a Chinese team, so some things on the Steam page might be lost in translation. For example, there aren't any main points about the story, but it seems to have an open world to explore, multiple party members to recruit, unique weapons, and a free-form character progression system where mages can wield giant swords as an example. Interestingly, the developers have released Arisen Force Hero Test and the free Arisen Force Life Devotee, which appear to have similar combat systems but differ in structure, with those not being epic open world titles but rather more combat focused ones, so you can try those out to get a feel of the action. Developer Scumhead has really gone from strength to strength and apparently have found their groove with their most recent release Vomitorium, which makes Mortar of interest, a slow-paced, exploration-heavy first-person RPG that throws you into unique and bizarre dimensions, with some very gnarly looking enemies and bosses, aided by the low fidelity look. You are free to tackle these areas and bosses in any order that you want, building out your arsenal of weapons to suit your playstyle, each with multiple functions and utility. You play as Hayward Generation 7 81363-7, who is essentially a corpse in armor, tasked with apprehending the missing Hayward Generation 1 Evelyn, whose disappearance coincided with the supernatural phenomena known as the Strange, proliferating itself across dimensions, looking so cool and weird that I have to give it a mention. From the artist and composer of Thumper comes Thrasher, another title with a focus on music, but there doesn't seem to be as much of a rhythm game element here, but rather leans more on the arcade action side, similar to titles like Rez. You are using your hand to guide a magnificent space eel through this trippy world, having to swoop around and, more importantly, violently trash to defeat bosses, looking so cool but kind of overstimulating at the same time. Of course, the concept of Kingmakers pretty much sells itself, in which you play as a modern man in medieval times, having access to trucks, assault rifles, shotguns, sniper rifles, RPGs, and even tanks, using them to mow down enemies by the hundreds while leading an army of your own. I wasn't quite sure where to place this, since there is a strategy and army command element similar to Dynasty Warriors, but also third-person shooting element, where I don't think you'll be adding points to your stats in this game, but there must be some way to unlock and acquire more weapons and vehicles. Still, it's a power fantasy of a game if I ever saw one, which is appealing and interestingly does tease a futuristic setting as well, so I'll be very interested to see how this plays out and is potentially one of the biggest games of the year. The developer of this game reached out, but I did already have Jackal on my watch list, a stylish action title that has Hotline Miami vibes but goes back further, set in retro 1970s hotels, where ultra-violence is probably the right way to describe this game, coming to us from the developer of Maniac and Butcher, so I am not surprised. Watch this video for upcoming third-person action RPGs instead.